China has been threatened. India will now be paying the highest American tariffs in Asia. After all, Donald Trump is on the job. In fact, the US president continues to back his foreign policy. The tariff revenue for the US may be growing, hitting over $27 billion in June. It could go to a gazillion, whatever number Trump can think of. But to what end? These numbers are just numbers. But America has been set on a path, a road that might lead to a very dark place. After slapping 50% tariffs of India, US President has now set his sight on China, threatening a dramatic escalation of tariffs on Chinese imports. In fact, this comes despite years of trade turbulence having already left deep marks on both nations' economies. While the political rhetoric is couched in terms of protecting American jobs and industry, the hard data and economic logic reveals that such a move would paradoxically deal the sharpest blow to the US economy itself. As of mid-2025, China remains one of America's most significant trading partners. First, let's look at US imports from China. $108.47 billion in Q1 of 2025 and $462 billion for all of 2024. This makes China the United States' top source of imported goods, spanning everything from consumer electronics to apparel and machinery. Now let's look at US exports to China. $31.82 billion in the first quarter of 2025, supporting over 5 lakh American jobs and forming crucial part of export-driven agriculture, aviation and services sector. Now let's make sense of this data. Even after previous rounds of tariffs, these numbers attest to the deep interdependency of the two economies, with China also remaining a critical market for American exports. The idea behind tariffs is simple: make foreign goods more expensive so domestic alternatives can flourish. But with the complexity of modern supply chains and entrenched consumer preferences, the results are actually far more damning for the United States. First, let's look at the short-term shocks. Tariffs are now costing the average US household $3,800 annually, with the low-income households being hit disastrously hard. The impact is already visible. Inflation rose to 0.3% just in July alone. A small number, right? But imagine, sugar that cost $10 costs $10.3 next month. And by the end of 6 months, it will be over 10% up from its base price. Now the prices of apparel, for instance, have gone up 17%. Staples like food, furniture, autos and electronics are more affected. Most Americans are seeing their real income drop as they pay more for the same goods. All 2025 tariffs, including new ones on China, are expected to shave 0.9 percentage points of US GDP growth this year, with long-term output 0.6 smaller, translating to a loss of around $180 billion per year. In fact, payroll employment is set to fall by nearly 5 lakh by the end of this year only, with unemployment rate tickling up, especially hard impacts in export-dependent and farming communities. Now, companies are scaling back or fleeing the Chinese market entirely, with US business investments in China falling to record lows due to tariff uncertainty. Near 70% of US businesses are directly affected, facing lost sales both to tariffs and to Chinese retaliation. Now, tariffs also push American firms to restructure sourcing, often diverting to even costlier suppliers or moving production unit out of China, resulting in insufficiency, delays and higher costs passed on to the customer. Key industries like auto electronics cannot specially replace Chinese factories, making production more expensive and less competitive globally. It's also important to talk about global repercussions. The consequences would ripple through the supply chains worldwide, drag down global GDP by up to 1% or more, and threaten to return to recessionary conditions in the United States and its trading partners, to say nothing of complete makeover of how nations interact and trade with each other. Beijing has already imposed a baseline tariffs of 125% on all US goods categorized and targeting other additional duties. US exporters, especially in agriculture and manufacturing, are already reporting double-digit sales decline in China. Trump's strategy to leverage tariffs against China, mirroring the pressure placed on India, is not just a diplomatic blunt instrument, but an economic time bomb. And the result? Higher inflation, shrinking output, job losses, battered household budgets, and destabilized global markets. Far from restoring American greatness, escalating tariffs risk triggering the very economic pain and uncertainty they are designed to fend off. If history and the 2025 numbers prove anything, it is the trade war that ultimately produced casualties on all sides. But this time, America risked wounding itself the most.